Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Parasite's annual international conference. I'm Cosmin, the Executive Director of Parasite, and for the ones of you who have not yet visited our space in the recent years, I invite you to do so in our premises, our little premises in Po Yan Street in Seongwon. For the next 3 days, 3 full days, however, we are delighted to be co-presenting our annual conference for a second time in a row now with our wonderful hosts, Asia Society Hong Kong Center. And I would like to take this moment to thank Alice Mong, Shahina Koda, and Vincent Ham for their generosity and for their work in making this event come to life in these beautiful surroundings. I would also like to thank our sponsors, Orientations Magazine and Yvonne Lee, for their support. This event, together with all our events, to all our Parasite events and daily activities, would not have been possible without the relentless support of our patrons and friends. Thank you. And of course, I must thank Parasite's fantastic team for their hard work, long hours, and extraordinary dedication. So thank you, Ethan Chang, Priscilla Jang, Jim Slam, Chini Lim, and Francis Wujaratana. Last but not least, thank you to all of our guests who flew many tens of thousands of miles combined to join us in Hong Kong to discuss together whether the living body is the last thing left alive. And I guess in that kind of physical conditions that are descended upon the body by extreme jet lag and long hours of flight, there's a particular resonance to this topic that we propose for this year's conference. Now, together with my wonderful co-curator, Anna Janevski, with whom it has been an utter pleasure and joy to collaborate, we have started discussing about what we now tentatively arrive to call the new performance turn, the kind of increased presence of living bodies in curatorial vocabularies, in the exhibition space, in the white space, and as well in the programming of institutions and museums around the world. And at Parasite, this little institution that has existed in the city for the past 18 years, one of the main missions that has existed from its first year existence, and which we are trying to uphold with our activities, is to grasp those aspects of our society and of our times where art can shed a new light, where entering that field of discussion through the perspective of art sheds a particular light upon those realities. And perhaps there hasn't been a more intense and a more precise reflection of the contemporary condition in the field of art in the past decade at least than this issue of the performance of the living bodies. And what we will try to figure out over the next days is where does that come from and what does that say about our society of today? Is it, and this is a proposition, is it a reflection of the economic system of our times where rather than putting the entire value on objects and commodities, the experience and the kind of like temporary kind of situations of flexibility are the main and the most valued commodities. So does this mean that this presence of the body, rather than being a form of escaping the commodification of objects, is actually playing more into the logics of this economic system? This is one of the questions that we will be asking.
Well, first of all, I would also like to thank Cosmin for inviting me, and he was likewise. It was a true joy and pleasure to work with you. And before just following up what you said, I would like also to thank the organizers and the whole Parasite wonderful team and all the speakers, of course, who accepted to come to Hong Kong and to be here to us, as well as the public. So as Cosmin said, those are more or less this is actually the first, somehow, as you might see, we divided the conference in 3 days, and what Cosmin just mentioned is somehow what are we going to talk today. And when Cosmin invited me, it will be also a result of some exchange that we had between us working with certain artists and somehow working in the field. And we are also aware that a lot of us here, we also participated in many panel discussions or even conferences about that, why dance in museums, why dance today, or like performance in institutions and so on. And we are also aware that sometimes those kind of discussions are a bit non-conclusive in the sense that we go out and we say, okay, so what we really said or what we really concluded, it's again we feel in the same space. Also, sometimes there are too simplified justification to all this, saying that art and dance or art and visual arts and live arts, they were somehow hand in hand during history. So sometimes we are talking about the hype, as like educational hype. So we would really like in those 3 days to try to go beyond and to really somehow deconstruct and to reflect what is really happening and why there is this attraction somehow for, and it's not, now it's even more than an attraction, like for live arts in particular in museums and art institutions. And of course, most of the art institutions that we know and most of the museums are being thought and designed to preserve and display objects. So of course those are mainly neutral spaces where somehow usually devoid even of human presence, and that's why we wanted to show this, and I show it very often during my lectures, so I'm excuse those who already seen it, but there is a race in the Louvre Museum on the left in the Barda part in 64 as a kind of very radical gestures. And then on the right is a Marta Minujín, Argentinian artist Marta Minujín performance in 74 at MoMA. And it's also interesting because when we think about the liveness, the live presence in the museum, so on the other hand, it's considered something like radical. On the other hand, we have a natural movement in the museum in exhibition spaces. Or when it's happening, like when performances are happening, they're outside the museum, so they have a kind of a radical and a political intention, or they're in the shadow, and today they're really in the spotlight. So we are going really to talk about this idea of the spotlight, why today there is spotlight, why there is so appealing, why there are many institutions really trying to work with performance and having performance curators, why dance is so present, why it's a global phenomenon, and this is also what Cosmin introductions. And of course, we would like also to consider what kind of history are we writing now, what kind of a narration, what kind of discourse are we constructing, or are we testifying in a way, and what are the histories and the discourse that have been left out or they're been leaving out.
Yes, and if we are to go quickly through the intentions behind the program of each of the 3 days, today we will start looking a little bit around and gravitate and at the different fields that gravitate around this intersection that we are interested in with this conference. We will be looking at contemporary dance as a field that as a field that has emerged as a new field of discourse in the last 15 to 20 years, as a very particular formation that has gone through a moment of disjunction in the 90s with its own genealogy and with its own past that was perhaps more radical than anything that had happened in the same decade in visual arts. We will do so by speaking with one of the key players of this transformation and one of the people who were like key in the process of reflecting about this formation and about this particular history. Tomorrow, we will get a little bit closer to the field of visual arts by looking at curatorial discourse, at looking in particular at the vocabulary that was at the disposal of this field of exhibition makers in the past decade. We start from a premise that a crisis of language, of vocabulary, has been there and still is, and that perhaps this presence of living bodies is to be discussed in relationship with that crisis. very often one can sense the kind of the liveness, and again we're going back to the title, and the energy produced by a performance by a living body is saving the conventions of an exhibition that otherwise has problems justifying itself as a legitimate set of experience and as a legitimate intellectual construction. Later on, in the second half of tomorrow, we will have the only proper panel of this conference, where we will try to look at the institutional landscape that has generated this performance turn, this new performance turn that we are talking about, and also the institutional landscape that is fostering at the moment and in the future. We will do so, again, entering from different angles and featuring people who have very different relationship with this topic. We will start from also some people who are key players in this institutional landscape, but we will also yes, but we will also hear from people who reflect from outsider positions as well on these topics. The third day, which is also the longest day of the conference, starts from another aspect and issue connected with this conference, because a lot of the issues that were mentioned by the two of us happened and occurred in the realm of institutions with a certain hegemony, and thus are I wouldn't want to call it necessarily Western-centric phenomena, but certainly phenomena that happened in centers of nexuses of power, which can very well include places from Korea to Brazil, but are certainly do not have the same kind of global outreach that other aspects of contemporary visual arts have. So that being the case, we are looking at another field, which is not just a geographical distinction, it is also a formal distinction at the field of performance art as a category of visual arts, and as a field that has existed, of course, in relation to the avant-garde for a much longer history, but we will particularly be looking at a number of case studies in the post-war global reality, and we will be navigating from different geographies and different moments when performance art occurred, and also played a significant role at very concrete historical moments of those contexts. At the end of the day, and as a conclusion to this association, and we hope as perhaps one of the most important, even if modest contributions that this conference could make, would be to understand the connection between these two aspects, to understand whether bringing this disparate and fragmentary and more global histories of performance art into another narrative that certainly appeared because of different contexts is a legitimate historiographical process. Are we creating an unnecessary intellectual fantasy of connecting these two fields? Are we, on the contrary, creating a more interesting, legitimate narrative that perhaps has also the potential to understand and to sort of narrate a more global story? I guess these are all questions that, ideally we will be able to tackle in these 3 days. So before I pass to Anna to introduce our first speaker and to also make a proposition, just a few sort of domestic issues. There's of course simultaneous translation from in between English and Cantonese Chinese, so please feel free to use the service. For the ones watching us over the internet, you can also participate by posing questions on our Facebook page, and they will be collected and posed at the end of the day in the plenary sessions. So
Cosmin and I, when we were preparing the conference, we made some kind of a dream list, and we were so lucky that a lot of speakers replied positively. That's why also we have so dense sessions, and there is a great expertise in the room. So we really hope that the plenary session this will come out. So I would really ask the speakers to somehow keep the 30 minutes, because this is important. As I said, otherwise the days are becoming too long. And also, we were thinking for a proposal that I have to say it's not my original idea. I'm stealing it from a New York-based artist, Adam Pendleton. He organized an event a few weeks ago, and after every speaker, there was a minute or even two of silence, when people could just go through their notes, you know, do some mental space, whatever it is. So with Cosmin, we decided that this could be also maybe a good try, because usually to have just one speaker after the other, sometimes we're a bit overwhelmed. So we will try also that after every speaker to leave you just 1 minute when you can have a moment of thinking, or however you want to use this 1 minute or two. So I think we should start with the presentation. We could go more and more, but there will be more opportunities. So we are very glad that for this first session, the first speaker is Andrea Lepecki, who is the associate professor at the Department of Performance Study at the New York University, and from 2014 also the artistic professor at the Stockholm University of Arts.